Back in 2019, LEGO acquired BrickLink, which was, at the time, a third-party peer-to-peer LEGO selling website. Along with the site and its features and the revenue stream, LEGO also wound up purchasing BrickLink's 3D design program, Studio. Since then, they've done a couple of things where they've run a program where you can design a model and submit it, and they might be able to make it into a set. They had previously run it a few times, calling it the AFL Designer Program, and recently they decided to take it, I guess, a little more seriously and call it the BrickLink Designer Program and run the contest a bit more formally with a few more rules. There's a lot of them written on this page here, but the upshot of it is basically that you have to build the model in Studio, and there's certain size and part count requirements, and you can only use parts from a limited selection of parts. It's not clear, but it strongly suggests that those are the parts that are currently in production, so they can easily source parts when they have to make the set. One other requirement that's new to this set of runs of the designer program is that you have to submit building instructions. Apparently, they had some bad experiences in the past with models that not only couldn't quite be easily assembled, but that they didn't know how to assemble them at all. So as part of the submission, you not only had to design a model, you have to make building instructions, which is actually somewhat of a tedious process if you want to make them good. Now, we know from LEGO Ideas the typical kind of thing that happens when you have people vote on LEGO models that they'd like to see made. You're going to get a lot of gigantic models, and you're going to get a lot of models based on outside IP. For the designer program, actually, you can't have your model based on any IP at all. So that's one thing handled. But for the part size, there was a comment in the program that said that they would use some sort of internal guideline to choose sets with a variety of sizes. With that set of criteria in mind, I actually entered the BrickLink Designer Program Series 1. Now, I'm not that familiar with building buildings, and the point of the program is to build something you'd like to see made into a set. So I tried to make something that I personally would enjoy, and it's this. It's a model of a subway station, and there's a few interesting things I'd like to show you. So this model has a few different elements. There's part of a street scene, and a relatively small subway platform, and a train track with a subway car. Now, the platform is kind of small, but that's because this isn't just a static display model. There's actually a function. And that's when the subway car goes by, it will change the scenery at the station. And so it'll change back if you run the subway car the other way. So you might be wondering how this works. So let's take a look at that. The first thing is that there's a chain drive right here that's controlled by this crank. And that plugs into the subway car there. The second is that, of course, there are two pieces of scenery that slide back and forth through a set of catches here. The last part of the trick is that the subway car's far side has two pins on it. So as the subway car goes by, it picks up those pins and drags the scenery past. So there's several compromises here because I didn't want this to be a humongous model, and it's already really big for 1,600 parts. The first, of course, is it's not a scale model of a subway car. It's definitely way shorter than it should be. And the second is to get the mechanism to work, since this is just passively dragged along, it has to be exactly the length of the subway car. So the two platforms together are the same length as the subway car itself. So that, in effect, restricts the entire size of the model to be 5 times the width of the platform. Part of this contest, as I mentioned earlier, is that you can't just submit the model, you have to submit a set of building instructions. And this means when building, you have to be very careful about if you can actually explain how to put something together to somebody else. So in this case, I had to think about how you would actually get this scenery piece inside the structure. The hooks, as I mentioned earlier, fit through this little window and get picked up by the subway. So you can't just drop this in there like that. Instead, had to build it in parts. So one half, slide the scenery in, slide the other half there, and then a wide variety of small parts, plates, and tiles go on to lock the two halves together. There's a hole here that fits over this protrusion and pulls the car along. The mathematics of the model dictate that there's going to be some empty space in the corners, and I didn't want to just waste that. So I built a couple small dioramas. This side has a pipe that goes up to the hydrant at street level, and there's some sort of critter swimming in the water here. On the other side, there's a ladder that goes up to a manhole cover at street level. The final oddity of this model is these skylights here at sidewalk level. And this isn't a normal feature of sidewalks, except maybe in Seattle, where there is an underground path. But in this model, they serve an important functional purpose. I didn't, in fact, add them until pretty late in the build because I'd only built digitally. And when I went to put it together, I realized that in a dark room, this scene is almost impossible to see because there'll be no light coming from in front of the model. So I added these skylights, which are somewhat decorative, but also allow some light into the scene if you're indoors in a dark place, but there's light above the model. This subway car, as I mentioned, is a compromise between a few things, one of which is looking nice. The model is not quite 8 studs across. It's 6 studs and 4 plates across. So 1/2 of a plate off of being the full 8 studs across. So it just barely fits past the wall here. There's a lot of snot work inside the model to get these windows up at this angle. So the whole thing's built upside down and nothing's actually entirely stable until the roof goes on. This center divider here, of course, is so that you can't see the scenery changing through the car. Anyway, I didn't win this round of the designer program, and if I enter again, I will probably make something else. LEGO unexpectedly and generously caused the rights to the model to revert back to you in the event that you don't win. So I'm allowed to do with this whatever I want. And what I will be doing is posting the instructions to Rebrickable so you can build it if you want, since I've already made the instructions. So please enjoy, and maybe you'll learn something by putting it together.